My team and I were suddenly transported to a strange maze of identical hallways where we faced threats we couldn't have possibly imagined. I saw strange glowing eyes in the darkness, and one researcher, Janice, was killed by an entity that seemed beyond the realms of physical possibility. At the end of my last account, we had discovered what could have been a way out, but we had just run out of the specimen labels that we had been using like breadcrumbs to mark our trail. This is what happened when we left level 0 of the Backrooms and moved deeper down to level 1. Researcher Diane was the first one to enter level 1, with researcher David and myself following next, and researchers Andrew and Ben not long after. Diane checked the readings on her equipment and found that nothing seemed to be working properly. Not the Geiger counters, not the air quality monitors, and especially not our radio communications. I don't understand, she said. I had to remind her that since we were in uncharted territory, we had to keep expecting the unexpected. Truthfully, at this point, it didn't matter to any of us that our equipment wouldn't be able to take any readings or record anything of our environment. After what had just happened to Janice, our priorities had fully shifted from understanding this place to simply figuring out how to survive, and hopefully, escape. Level 1 of the Backrooms was markedly different to Level 0, though as we would come to learn, not as different as some of the other levels were going to be. While Level 0 was an endless stretch of yellow wallpaper and humming fluorescence, resembling some kind of hotel or office building, Level 1 felt cold and unfinished by comparison, resembling an underground parking structure. In contrast to how muffled all of our footsteps had been in Level 0, every movement in Level 1 reverberated off the hard, smooth walls and echoed throughout the complex. On the one hand, it was comforting to once again be able to hear something other than the hum of the fluorescent bulbs. On the other hand, after what had happened to Janice on the last level, we were all hyper-aware that making too much noise could potentially attract unwanted attention. Others who have come before us call this place the Habitable Zone, but it hardly looks like a location that would warrant that name. The walls were uncovered, made of stark concrete and cinder blocks, while the ceiling was crossed with exposed pipes and wires that led to God knows where. The floor was concrete too, which almost made us miss the carpet on Level 0. Everything around us smelled earthy, with a faint hint of wet paint. The first order of business was to find supplies. We started walking, in the vain hopes that there would be anything for us to find. But did you know that you can find incredible videos on both the Backrooms and the SCP Foundation right here on the DrBob channel? All you need to do is subscribe and hit the bell to turn on notifications, and you'll have my videos delivered straight to your feed. Now, back to the Backrooms. No matter how far we walked, though, we never seemed to move from the spot. This place is exhibiting some serious non-Euclidean geometry, said researcher Andrew. Luckily, he was somewhat familiar with places like this, having had previous experiences documenting the city of Alagada as part of his work with the SCP Foundation. He explained to us that in places like this, there was a method we could use to find our way. We had to pick a spot, a particular column, a pipe, or even just a stain or crack in the wall, and walk forward, focusing entirely on that. Losing focus would only serve to make us too disoriented to go on. According to him, this would eventually become second nature to us, but we had to be wary to never lose focus entirely. The most interesting thing we found about Level 1 by far was that, against all odds, it seemed that people had once inhabited the place. I suppose that this is what is meant when people refer to Level 1 as the Habitable Zone. Though we never actually saw these people, there were flags and logos posted up throughout the level, and even a few rooms that contained computers and other equipment. Around this level are scattered wooden crates, seemingly left behind by someone calling themselves the Major Explorers Group. These crates contain supplies, mainly dried rations and bottles of something called almond water. Though we weren't sure what was in it, other than, apparently, almonds, we had to stay hydrated in order to keep going, and mysterious almond water was better than no water at all. There were 2 bottles, which we shared between ourselves. The almond water was surprisingly nourishing, and I almost felt like I was able to see better than I had before. In addition to the almond water, which we drank immediately, There were enough rations to perhaps keep a single explorer alive for a day, but not nearly enough to split between all 5 of us. This was a distressing find, as at that time we didn't know if we'd find any other crates. If there were more, it could take days of wandering to reach it. Then researcher Ben pointed to something at the bottom of the crate. It was a note signed MEG, which we presumed stood for Major Explorers Group. The note was brief, but surprisingly detailed, and from it, we were able to figure out a little bit more about the so-called Habitable Zone of Level 1. Level 1 was made up of a few distinct sectors, each with a unique look. These sectors were loosely connected by the corridors, though the mutable nature of the level makes tracking exactly which corridor leads where to be nearly impossible. The sector we had found ourselves in was the Akila sector, the most common place for new travelers to no-clip into. Apparently, this is the location of the Major Explorers Group's base, and apparently they send out patrols, though in all the time we were exploring the Akila sector, we never saw them. A few times we saw people off in the distance, wandering aimlessly between the identical concrete pillars. Researcher Diane called out to them, and though a few raised their heads towards her, most simply continued whatever they were doing. "Those must be the patrols from the Major Explorers Group," Diane said. And though there wasn't really another immediate explanation for why other people would be down here, I had to disagree with her. There was something off about how they moved, almost like they were just repeating the motions. My suspicions were confirmed when we finally were able to get close to one of these people, or perhaps people was the wrong word. These were what I would later learn were the facelings. These humanoid beings look like regular people from a distance, but the closer you get to them, the more it becomes apparent that their features are totally wrong. In fact, as soon as you get to a distance of about 12 feet, it becomes evident that they don't have any facial features at all. It's merely a trick of the light, or perhaps a trick of the mind, that gives them the impression of having faces at a distance. We saw plenty of facelings in our time in the Akila sector, but never once did we actually see any members of the Major Explorers Group, nor did we ever find their base. But given the vastness of the sector, it's entirely possible we might never cross paths with them. What we did find, however, was a door. At first, we didn't even think to try it. We'd been wandering for what must have been days at that point, and we'd encountered a number of doors that hadn't opened. Whether that was because they were simply part of the wall, or because they were blocked by something on the other side, it was impossible to say. But finally, by some miracle, we found one that opened. It was a plain door, like you'd find leading to a fire escape. When we pushed it open, it led into a white hallway lined with more doors, stretching off as far as we could see. Despite how long the corridor seemed, it was actually completely non-anomalous, especially compared to the Akila sector, where it had taken days to just cross a single room. The space was tight. We had to start walking single file, but in here we saw even more signs of habitation. One of the many doors we passed had the symbol of the Major Explorers Group hanging from it. When we pushed the door open, the room was empty once again, but there was another note. "Congratulations on finding the corridors, Wanderer," the note said. "This place is much safer than the non-Euclidean halls, and therefore is the best place to settle in for the night. Obviously, resting in such an inhospitable place is crucial in order to stay sane and efficient, allowing you to eventually find other people." A murmur of excitement went through the group. "We should stay here," said researcher Daniel. "The longer we stay in one place, the more likely it'll be that we run into other people who aren't just those faceless drones we saw earlier." "Daniel's right," said Andrew. "We might as well sit tight and plan our next steps before we do anything reckless." Diane shook her head. "Every settlement we've found so far has been abandoned," she said. "There are supplies, but no people. Doesn't that seem strange to any of you?" "I have to admit it does," I said. "But according to this note," David protested, "there aren't supposed to be any entities in the corridors." Everyone looked at me. I knew that as the team leader, the researchers were all looking to me for answers, but I was feeling out of my depth. "I think I have a solution," Ben said. He started looking around the room for supplies that we could use. In a cabinet up against the wall, he was able to find a ball of string, which he handed to me. "I think we should split up," Ben said. "David and Andrew can stay here to serve as a base camp, and the rest of us can explore further. We can use this string the same way we were using David's stickers in the first level of the maze. That way, we'll easily find our way back." I congratulated him on his quick thinking, and the three of us prepared for our journey back into level 1. Diane, Ben, and I all split up, each carrying a bottle of almond water and a section of string to mark our paths. In retrospect, splitting up was probably the worst thing we could have done. Perhaps the discovery of a safe room among all the empty chaos had lulled us into a false sense of security. It was just enough like the world we knew to make us feel in control again, even though, as we would discover, this wasn't the case. But during this period, we were able to cover a lot of ground and learn more about Level 1. Beyond the Akila sector was the Guild sector, perhaps named for the slightly warmer, goldish tone of the concrete and pipes. This area was less dirty than the Akila zone, despite being just as dull and unfinished. While here, researcher Diane was able to find more crates full of rations and stocked up on enough to bring back to our base camp. While in this area, Diane found another person, a man in a heavy coat surrounded by crates. He called himself the Trader and demanded that Diane trade with him before he was willing to reveal any information. To my knowledge, this is the only interaction any of us had with another human being while in Level 1. Ben, meanwhile, came back to the group having visited the Gothic sector, named for the fact that its concrete pillars give the impression of a vaulted ceiling. This sector also looks like a parking structure, but one located outside, under a bridge or overpass of some kind. Ben could feel a breeze in this sector, and occasionally saw leaves blowing past his feet, but no matter how far he walked, the concrete ceiling never gave way to the sky above. Eventually, he needed to turn back, suspecting that he could have kept walking forever and never seen the sky. I myself walked through a door into what I would eventually discover was the Ouroboros sector. As the name implies, this is a small sector which loops back around on itself rather than extending into infinity like the rest of them. While I explored this area, I felt extremely ill at ease. Out of the corners of my vision, I could see shadowy figures moving around in and out of the concrete pillars. At first I assumed that these were hallucinations, until I started hearing the clang of tools as well. I didn't know what these shadowy beings were or what they were doing, but I followed my string back to the door and got back out of there as soon as possible. Through other notes left by the major explorers group, as well as through what little Diane was able to get the trader to share with her, we heard tales of 2 more sectors, evidently more difficult to access than the others. One was called the Garden Sector, which, despite its pleasant name, should be avoided at all costs. The place was full of long, creeping vines that entirely covered the floor and the walls, stretching up to the ceiling. Though it might seem like a paradise compared to the dull grays and browns of the rest of the level, it was far deadlier than anything seen in any of the other sectors. Anyone who touches these plants will become engulfed by them, eventually becoming one with the foliage entirely. The sheer amount of plants in the garden sector was a grim reminder of how many fellow travelers either haven't heeded that warning or never got the chance to hear it. The other sector we heard of was the aptly named Fabled Sector, a section that was once full of people but long since abandoned, although rumors persist that it's still there, waiting to be rediscovered. Personally, I can't exactly comment on whether those rumors are true. Eventually, we all regrouped at our base camp in the back of the corridor, expecting both David and Andrew to be there. We were surprised to find that it was just Andrew. Naturally, I was extremely worried and asked him if something happened. "David went out," Andrew explained, pacing around the room. "I think he was worried that you wouldn't come back and wanted to see where you'd gone." I was furious that Andrew had let him leave, but I was even more furious with David, especially since he had been the one who had been so keen to stay behind. I let Andrew know as much. If we had been back in the Foundation, dangerous decisions like that would warrant an official reprimand. Down here, they were likely to end in death. For a while, we patrolled the hallways, waiting for David to come back through any of the doors. Eventually, he did. Returning through the door that we had found led to the Gothic sector. David walked in, looking very calm, despite how stressed Andrew had described him as being earlier. "What the hell's the matter with you?" I snapped at him as soon as he came in. "If you'd been any later coming back, we would have had to look for you, and that would have put the whole team in danger." David seemed to not even realize I was angry at him. He just shrugged and said, "I'm fine." This was when I think all of us realized something was off. "Where'd you go?" Andrew asked. There was a long pause, during which David didn't even seem to be registering what was being said. He just said again, "I'm fine." Alarm bells started going off in my mind. There was a chance he was just having some kind of mental episode. There was also a chance that somehow this wasn't David anymore. "How can you just say you're fine?" Andrew shouted. "You disappeared and left me here by myself." This was when Andrew shoved him, not very hard, but enough that it finally got a reaction from David. His facial expression shifted from bland calm to a genuinely terrifying, monstrous rage. He let out a shriek that no human should ever make and attacked Andrew, tearing into him. Ben and Diane jumped onto David, or rather, the thing pretending to be David's back, and tried to wrestle him off to no avail. Whatever had stolen his skin was incredibly strong. They were both flung off, and by the time they got up, Andrew was beyond saving. Diane drew the knife she kept holstered to her belt for emergencies and drove it into the creature's shoulder. It wailed again, and instead of blood, a viscous, clear liquid started to ooze out. We would later learn that this creature was called a skin stealer, and provoking it like this was the last thing you should do when you encounter one. These creatures are docile when not actively hunting and usually just wander the first 3 levels of the Backrooms, babbling in imitations of voices they've heard from human travelers. They become dangerous when hunting, as they solely feed on human beings, then take their skins to cover their soft, pale bodies. Once a skin stealer has covered itself in its victim's skin, it will be functionally identical to the victim, save for 2 things. The first being that they can't speak. They only repeat phrases with no understanding of what they mean. The second, their blood is translucent, leading to a common rhyme among Backrooms explorers: blood runs red, they're not dead. Blood runs clear, don't get near. After 24 hours, the skin will start to fall off, and the skin stealer will move on to another location, avoiding humans until it needs to feed again. The correct course of action if a member of your party is a skin stealer is to leave them alone and let them be on their way. If you make the same mistake that we did and antagonize it, it will attack until it no longer feels threatened, which is usually a synonym for until you're dead. Not knowing what else to do, the 3 of us ran. We ran down the end of the corridor and came to a door that was marked with a large red exit sign. With the skin stealer behind us, there was no other option. I threw open the door and suddenly, the whole corridor was bathed in a deep red light. There was no time to be afraid, so the 3 of us ran through. But what we found on the other side is going to have to be a story for another day. Want more mysteries and anomalies from the files of DrBob? Check out SCP-674, the exposition gun makes Nintendo real life. Someday, your life might just depend on it.